11 years ago, my parents drove me off this property because my face didn't fit their aesthetic. Today, I returned in a private car, wearing a suit that cost more than my father's first business. The air smelled of lilies and old money, heavy with the pretense of perfection. I adjusted my cuffs. I wasn't here to crash a party. I was here to close a very expensive book. The 18-year-old girl who cried in the driveway was gone. The woman standing here now didn't come for an apology. She came for a verdict. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. From where I stood, shaded by the sprawling limbs of an ancient oak, James and Susan looked less like parents and more like curators of a very expensive, very fragile museum exhibit. My father, James, held a champagne flute with the practiced ease of a man who believed his own press releases. My mother, Susan, was adjusting a floral arrangement that was already perfect, her eyes scanning the crowd not for friends, but for flaws. That was their currency. Flaws. They traded in them. They profited from them. And 18 years ago, they decided I was the biggest flaw in their portfolio. I watched them laugh at something the groom's father said, a unified front of elegance and old money charm. It was a terrifying performance because I knew what lay beneath the foundation. I remembered the summer I found the paperwork. I was 19, working the night shift as a janitor at the local community college because my parents had told me there was no money for my tuition. They said the market was down. They said assets were frozen. I believed them because parents are supposed to protect you, not plunder you. But the truth wasn't in the market. It was in a locked drawer in my father's study. My grandmother had left me a trust fund. $250,000. It was meant to be my start, my safety net. Instead, it became Isabella's renovation budget. I found the transfer slips. I found the forged signatures, my name scrawled in my mother's handwriting. They hadn't invested that money in my education. They had invested it in Isabella's face. The rhinoplasty, the veneers, the pageant coaches, the finishing school in Switzerland. They took the legacy meant for my future and used it to sculpt my sister into their ideal product. I remember standing in that study, the smell of mahogany and betrayal thick in the air. When I confronted them, they didn't even deny it. Susan had looked at me with a chilling, pitying stare and said, "Elena, look in the mirror. That money would be wasted on you. Isabella has potential. She represents this family. You have a good personality." It wasn't just theft. It was an aesthetic judgment. They had monetized my existence and decided I was a bad investment. For years, I carried that shame like a physical weight. I thought there was something wrong with me, some defect in my DNA that made me unlovable. But then I understood. It wasn't about my face. It was about their survival. In a narcissistic system, there is no room for two realities. They needed a golden child to project their grandiose fantasies onto, a mirror that reflected only perfection. That was Isabella. But to maintain that illusion, they also needed a place to dump their shame, their insecurities, their ugliness. They needed a trash can. That was me. I was the scapegoat. They needed me to be ugly, so Isabella could be beautiful. They needed me to be a failure, so their theft could be justified as resource allocation. If I had succeeded back then, if I had shown, it would have shattered the narrative they built their lives around. They didn't hate me because I was flawed. They hated me because I was the evidence of their own moral rot. I watched Isabella now, posing for a photographer near the altar. She looked stunning. Manufactured, polished, expensive. A $250,000 masterpiece built on the back of my stolen future. But the funny thing about building a life on theft is that you never actually own it. You just rent it until the bill comes due. I took a sip of sparkling water, the bubbles sharp against my tongue. I wasn't the janitor anymore. I wasn't the ugly duckling hiding in the library. I was the CEO of Lumina. I had built an empire not on borrowed money, but on the very thing they mocked. My understanding of what is real and what is fake. They thought they had buried me. They forgot that I was a seed. And now the harvest was here. I walked toward the reception tent, a cathedral of white silk and suspended florals that probably cost more than the average American home. The gravel crunched beneath my heels, a satisfying rhythmic sound that grounded me. I wasn't sneaking in. I walked straight down the center path. Susan intercepted me before I even reached the first row of tables. It was impressive, actually. Her radar for imperfection was still as sharp as a laser. She moved with the frantic, bird-like energy of a woman whose entire existence relied on the maintenance of an illusion. She blocked my path, a wall of pastel chiffon and aggressive perfume. She didn't look me in the eye. She looked at my hairline, my chin, my neck, scanning for the defects she remembered, the defects she had spent years trying to scrub away. "The service entrance is around the back," she hissed, her voice low and tight. "And you're late. The catering manager was supposed to have the staff lined up 20 minutes ago." Stop. I didn't correct her. I just looked at her. It was fascinating. I was wearing a suit from a designer she worshipped in magazines, holding a clutch made of Italian leather, standing with a posture that screamed authority. But Susan couldn't see it. She literally could not process the image of me as anything other than the help or the problem. To her I was static. I was the 19-year-old girl with cystic acne and frizzy hair who cleaned the floors. "I'm not catering, Susan," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the tremor that used to be there whenever she looked at me. Her eyes snapped up to mine, and for a split second there was confusion, then recognition, and then horror. It wasn't the warm recognition of a mother seeing a lost child. It was the horror of a host spotting a wine stain on a white carpet. "Elena." She breathed the name like it was a curse. She took a step back, her gaze raking over my face again. "What are you doing here? Who let you in?" "I walked in," I said. "You can't be here," she whispered, grabbing my arm. Her nails dug into the fabric of my jacket. "Look at you. You think because you fixed your skin you can just waltz back into our lives. We have press here, Elena. We have investors. People who matter." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm here." "You're here to beg," she spat, her face contorting into a sneer that ruined her Botox. "You blew through the trust fund we gave you, didn't you? Wasted it on whatever treatments. You needed to look normal. And now you want more. Well, the bank is closed. Get out before you embarrass your sister." The revisionist history was breathtaking. "The trust fund we gave you. They stole it to buy Isabella a face. And now she was accusing me of wasting money to fix mine." I didn't feel anger. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. She was confirming every hypothesis I had ever made about her. Then Isabella appeared. The bride. She floated over in a cloud of custom lace, looking every inch the princess my parents had paid for her to be. But up close, the panic in her eyes was manic. "Mom, what is going on?" Isabella demanded, her voice rising in a shrill crescendo. She spotted me, and her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. Whoa. No, no, no. You cannot be here. The photographer is setting up the wide shots. You ruin the aesthetic, Elena. You always ruin the aesthetic." "Hello, Isabella," I said. "Nice dress. It almost looks like you paid for it." "Security." Isabella waved her hand frantically at a large man standing near the perimeter. "We need this person removed. She's a stalker. She's disturbed." Susan tightened her grip on my arm, trying to physically turn me away. "You heard her. Leave. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. We scrubbed this family clean of your mess years ago. I will not let you stain this day." They were terrified. Not of my actions but of my presence. My existence was a threat to their brand. They stood there, a united front of hollow beauty, ready to throw me out into the dirt again. But they forgot one thing. When you own the ground you stand on, nobody can move you. "I wouldn't do that," a deep voice cut through the panic. We all turned. Nathaniel walked toward us, his tuxedo sharp, his expression unreadable. Susan let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. She smoothed her dress, instantly switching from bouncer to doting mother-in-law. "Nathaniel, darling," she cooed, stepping in front of me to block his view. "I am so sorry. We have a situation. A distant relative. She's unwell. She crashed the reception. Security is handling it. We didn't want to upset you." Isabella latched onto his arm, her knuckles white. "She's leaving, Nate. Right now. Just go back to the head table. I'll deal with this." Nathaniel didn't look at Isabella. He didn't look at Susan. He stepped around them as if they were traffic cones and stopped directly in front of me. He didn't look angry. He looked starstruck. "Elena Sterling?" he asked. His voice wasn't accusing. It was reverent. I didn't flinch. I held his gaze. "Hello, Nathaniel." Susan let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Oh, you don't know her, Nathaniel. She's nobody. She's just nobody," Nathaniel repeated, finally glancing at my mother with a look of genuine confusion. "Susan, this is the founder of Lumina. I've been trying to get a meeting with her for 6 months. My firm owns a 4% stake in her Series B round. She's the reason our portfolio outperformed the market last quarter." The silence that fell over the group was absolute. It was the sound of a worldview imploding. Susan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked from me to Nathaniel, her brain short-circuiting. The narrative she had sold herself for 15 years, that I was the failure, the waste, the stain, didn't just crack. It disintegrated. Isabella looked like she was going to be sick. "You invest in her. We bet the house on her," Nathaniel said, turning back to me. He extended a hand, treating me not as a sister-in-law, but as a titan. "Elena, I had no idea you were related to Isabella. She never mentioned you. I assumed." "Well, honestly, I assumed a CEO of your caliber wouldn't have time for a Napa wedding." "I made time," I said, taking his hand. His grip was firm, professional. "I wanted to see what my family has been building." "We need to talk," Nathaniel said, his energy shifting from social to strategic. "The Asian market expansion, I have ideas. Can I steal you? Just for 5 minutes?" "No," Isabella shrieked. It was too loud, too desperate. Heads turned. She tried to recover, forcing a trembling smile. "Nate, honey, the speeches." "Kate, you can't talk business now. It's our day." Nathaniel looked at his bride, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of irritation behind his eyes. "Isabella, this is Elena Sterling. You don't make her wait." He gestured toward the terrace, away from the crowd. I nodded and followed him, leaving my mother and sister standing in the dust of their own irrelevance. As I walked away, I glanced back at Isabella. She was frantically checking her reflection in her phone, smoothing her hair, checking her teeth. That's when it hit me. The facade of perfection. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and I didn't see the golden child anymore. I saw a construction site. I knew the cost of her nose, the veneers, the chin implant, the personal trainers. My parents had spent a fortune curating her exterior, polishing the surface until it gleamed like a diamond. But it was a hollow brilliance. It was the same logic they applied to everything. If it looks expensive, it is valuable. If it looks perfect, it is good. But in business, and in life, a perfect exterior with no underlying assets is a liability. It's fraud. Isabella was a walking Ponzi scheme. She had the glossy branding, the high-end marketing, and the venture capital funding, mostly stolen from me, but there was no product. There was no soul. Just a desperate, clawing need to keep the lights on so nobody noticed the warehouse was empty. Nathaniel led me to a quiet stone balustrade overlooking the vineyard. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the vines. "I apologize for the ambush," Nathaniel said, leaning against the stone. "But really, Elena, your distribution model is genius. I'm an investor, but I'm also a fan. I value transparency above everything else. That's why I love Lumina. You list every ingredient. You show the supply chain. Transparency is the only currency that matters," I said, watching him carefully. "If you hide things, they rot." "Exactly," he nodded. "That's why I'm so proud to be marrying into this family. Isabella. She shares that value. Her charity work. Beauty for all. It's inspiring. I've put a lot of my own capital into it because I believe in her vision." I kept my face neutral, but my internal alarm bells began to ring. "Beauty for all," I repeated. "I've heard the name. It's a non-profit. Grants for reconstructive surgery," Nathaniel said, beaming. "Helping burn victims, accident survivors. It's noble work. Although..." He hesitated, frowning slightly. "The operational costs are higher than I expected. The overhead is massive." "Is it?" I turned to face him fully. I have some experience with non-profit auditing. The financials can be tricky. Who handles the vendor contracts? Isabella does it all herself, he said. She says she wants total control to ensure quality. But honestly, the quarterly reports are messy. I've been meaning to ask for a full audit, but I didn't want to spook her before the wedding. A full audit is never a bad idea, Nathaniel, I said softly. Especially when you're the primary donor. Do you have the vendor list on you? Or access to the cloud? He pulled out his phone. I have the shared drive right here. Why? Humor me, I said. Call it professional curiosity. Nathaniel unlocked his phone and handed it to me. The screen glowed in the twilight, displaying a spreadsheet of vendors and payouts. I scanned the list. Catering, venue, florists, all standard. But then I saw it. A recurring monthly payment of $25,000 to a company called Aesthetica Holdings. Froze. The name wasn't just familiar. It was the smoking gun. 12 years ago, when I was fighting my parents for the scraps of my trust fund, I had hired a private investigator. I couldn't afford a good one, just a guy who worked out of a strip mall, but he found something interesting. My parents funneled money through a shell company to hide assets from the IRS. That company was Aesthetica Holdings. I scrolled down. The payments to Aesthetica started exactly 6 months ago, the same week Nathaniel announced his engagement to Isabella. The memo lines were vague: consulting fees, branding strategy, outreach coordination. I tapped on the vendor details. The registered address for Aesthetica Holdings wasn't an office building. It was a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. Nathaniel, I said, keeping my voice steady. Do you know what Aesthetica Holdings is? He frowned. Isabella said they were a boutique PR firm. Why? Because Aesthetica Holdings doesn't do PR, I said. It's a shell company my parents set up in 2008 to evade taxes. Has no employees. Has no office. It exists solely to launder money. Nathaniel stared at me, the color draining from his face. What are you saying? I'm saying Isabella isn't using your charity money to help burn victims, I said, handing the phone back to him. She's funneling it directly into my parents' offshore account. They're embezzling from you, Nathaniel. And they're using your wedding as the cover. He looked at the screen, then back at me. Denial warred with logic in his eyes. He was a venture capitalist. He knew how to spot a bad deal. He just never expected the bad deal to be wearing a white dress. Are you sure? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I can prove it, I said. Pull up the incorporation documents for Aesthetica. Look at the signatories. He tapped furiously on his phone, accessing a public records database he clearly used for due diligence. A moment later he stopped. He turned the screen toward me. There, listed as the primary officers of Aesthetica Holdings, were James and Susan Sterling. And listed as the secretary, Isabella Sterling. The silence on the terrace was heavy, suffocating. Nathaniel wasn't looking at the phone anymore. He was looking at the reception tent, where Isabella was currently laughing, holding a glass of champagne paid for with stolen money. They stole from a charity, he said, his voice cold and flat. They stole from my charity. They stole from me first, I said. It's their business model. They take what isn't theirs to maintain an image they can't afford. Nathaniel put his phone in his pocket. He straightened his jacket. The look on his face wasn't heartbreak. It was the look of a man who had just realized he was about to sign a contract with a con artist. Thank you, Elena, he said. I think it's time for a toast. We walked back toward the reception, the gravel crunching under our feet sounding like the drum roll before an execution. The sun had completely set, and the tent glowed with warm, golden light, a beacon of celebration that was about to become a crime scene. Nathaniel strode to the small stage where the band had just finished a set. He signaled the lead singer, who handed him the microphone with a confused smile. The chatter in the room died down as the guests noticed the groom standing alone. His expression solemn. Thank you all for being here, Nathaniel said, his voice amplified and steady. Isabella and I wanted to make this day unforgettable. And I believe we're about to achieve that. Isabella, seated at the head table, beamed. She looked relieved, assuming the business talk was over and the adoration was resuming. James and Susan clinked their glasses, ready for a tribute to their parenting. Before we cut the cake, Nathaniel continued, I have a question for my beautiful bride. Isabella, could you come up here for a moment? Isabella stood, smoothing her dress, and glided to the stage. She took Nathaniel's hand, playing the part of the blushing bride to perfection. Isabella, Nathaniel said, looking into her eyes. Can you tell everyone here about Aesthetica Holdings? The smile froze on Isabella's face. It didn't fade. It just stopped like a video buffering. Her eyes darted to the crowd, then back to Nathaniel. What? Aesthetica Holdings, Nathaniel repeated, his voice echoing in the silent tent. The consulting firm in the Cayman Islands. The one my charity pays $25,000 to every month. Can you tell our guests what services they provide for burn victims? A murmur rippled through the crowd. James stood up so fast his chair tipped over. Nathaniel, this is inappropriate. We can discuss business later. Sit down, James, Nathaniel said. It wasn't a request. Isabella pulled her hand away. Nate, you're drunk. Stop it. You're embarrassing me. I'm not drunk, Nathaniel said. I'm just informed. Thanks to Elena. He gestured to where I stood near the entrance. Every head in the room turned toward me. I didn't hide. I stepped forward, holding my phone up. I have the incorporation documents right here, I said, my voice projecting clearly. Aesthetica Holdings. Officers. James and Susan Sterling. Secretary. Isabella Sterling. It's a shell company. You're stealing money from a charity meant for burn victims to fund your lifestyle. Isabella stared at me, her face contorted with a rage that shattered her porcelain mask. You jealous, ugly bitch, she shrieked. Her voice cracked, shrill and ugly. You've always been jealous. Look at you. You spent thousands to fix your face, but you're still the same monster underneath. You ruin everything. The crowd gasped. The cameras flashed. The facade was gone. There was no golden child. There was just a thief in a white dress, screaming insults about her sister's appearance while standing in the wreckage of her own fraud. It's over, Isabella, Nathaniel said, turning away from her. The wedding is over. The charity is frozen. And my lawyers will be contacting the authorities in the morning. James rushed the stage, his face purple. Now see here. You can't just, Elena. Tell him you're lying. We're so proud of you. We knew you'd make something of yourself. We were tough on you to make you strong. Don't do this to your family. It was pathetic. The pivot from abuse to flattery was so clumsy it was insulting. I'm not doing this to you, I said. You did this to yourselves. You built a house of cards on a foundation of theft. I just opened a window. I turned and walked out of the tent. Behind me, the chaos erupted. Shouting, crying, the sound of a dynasty collapsing under the weight of its own lies. I didn't look back. I walked toward the valet stand where the air felt lighter. Julian was leaning against our rental car, looking at the stars. He didn't ask what happened. He just opened the door. As we drove away from the Sterling estate, leaving the shouting behind, I waited for the rush of triumph. But it didn't come. Instead, there was just quiet. And that's when I realized the truth about revenge. The best revenge isn't burning their house down. It's building your own house so big, so bright, and so full of love that you can't even see the smoke from their fire anymore. My victory wasn't their collapse. It was this drive home. It was my life, untouched by their hands. If you've ever had to build yourself back up from nothing, share a muscle arm emoji in the comments. And if you believe that the best revenge is massive success, hit that share button. Let's remind the world that we define our own worth.